Hello, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Adam Golov, Marketing and Communications Manager at Data Conversion Laboratory, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know we will allow time at the end of the webinar for questions and answers, so please write your questions in the chat area as they come to mind. If we don't have time to answer them all, we will make them available on our website. Next slide, please. For those of you who are not familiar with DCL, we convert and organize content to create electronic documents, populate databases, publish on the web, and basically get it ready for tomorrow's technology. Next slide, please. DCL services help you refine your document conversion strategy, identify document redundancy, extract metadata, and transform legacy and future documents for real needs, today and in the future. Next slide, please. We serve a very broad client base. Next slide, please. Spanning all industries. Today, we are thrilled to introduce Steve Reagan, Chief Relationship Officer for Kinetic Corporation, a global translation process management service. He has over 30 years of B2B sales and marketing experience and set up business services in over 10 global countries. And Carrie Boone, Senior Account Manager with Kinetic Corporation, who has been working in translation customer relations since 2007. She graduated from the University of Louisville, traveled extensively while she had the chance before completing a master's degree in classical archaeology from the University of Missouri-Columbia. Carrie is currently living in Louisville, Kentucky, relaxing with a home renovation and a new baby. Without further ado, welcome Steve and Carrie.
Thank you, Adam. So thank you all for joining the webinar. Just a little bit about Kinetic. We're based out of Louisville, Kentucky. We started out actually in the photography business, and then our founder elected to get into software development. And we developed several business software solutions. So we are a software and services company. And right now we're going to be talking about our core product, which is translation process management, or as it's best known in the industry, translation management systems. We do offer three different models. One is transactional, the other one is SaaS-oriented, and the third is enterprise. And we offer it in two different forms. We have both a turnkey, which is a total Kinetic solution, and we have a user-based workflow. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Carrie to talk about our topic for today.
All right, so our topic for the webinar today is internationalization. So when we talk about internationalization, we're referring to the preparation of files for translation. So as a company that offers a translation management system, we do a lot of internationalization, or pre-DTP as it's sometimes called. So this file preparation is critical for certain types of files that are sent out for translation, mainly due to the fact that all files are sent through a translation memory to find content matches before they are sent out to linguists to complete. So the better those files are prepped for translation, the higher matches we are likely to see in the memory. So the key to all this is in the matches. So the more matches we find in the translation memory, the more money a company can save on their translation costs. So we'll come back to this in just a minute. So let's talk about process. In general, it looks something like this. So when you submit your files for translation directly to an LSP or through another translation management system, the project manager is going to review the materials and determine what happens next. So the files will then pass through an internationalization or pre-DTP step to get them ready for translation. Then they are fed through the translation memory to retrieve as much as possible from previously translated material. And then the files are packaged and sent to the LSP or translator to complete the translation and finalize any DTP or typesetting. And then the files are sent back to you, the client, to review the finalized documents. And finally, the translation memory is updated and the translation project archived. So let's start at the top. To give you some perspective of what a project manager might be doing when you send your files to them for translation, they're basically going to find out up front everything they need to get the job done. So each company, each project manager has a methodology for handling their client's projects. They're defined by the type of files that were sent over, the difficulty of the particular files, and what this client is asking for in the final product. They're going to look over your files, sort out any supporting materials that aren't meant to be translated. They're going to check if anything is missing, like fonts or linked images. Are the files compatible with the translation tools, or do they need to be converted first? Do the files contain images with embedded text? And if so, does the client need that text translated? They're going to check that the files match up to the instructions that are given. Are the instructions clear? Does this target language or subject require the special use of a glossary or a guide? Is the linguist that they're sending this project to credited in the subject matter and language for the project? So they're also going to be checking the deadline given for the project. Is it reasonable? Does this project need to be treated as a rush? Or what quality would be sacrificed by the rush, and is that acceptable? So now that the project manager has all the files organized, the deadlines are okay, linguists are lined up to take the job, all the pieces are there, it's time to get started. So prepping the actual files for translation is called internationalization. This is basically a quality step, an editing pass on your files. The document specialists working on your files are going to sift through them and prepare the files for the translation process. So the question here is it necessary? So the answer is yes, depending on the type of files you are sending to your LSP. So it's necessary for two reasons. One, most linguists contracted by the LSP are not simply going to be typing out the translation in the original application. They're going to be working with computer-assisted translation tools, or CAT tools. CAT tools can be very helpful to the linguist, allowing for greater speed of translation and a greater reuse of existing material. There are also quality assurance tools that help the linguists achieve consistency and minimize their errors. So when you send your files to the LSP to be translated, the files will be converted to a bilingual format that the CAT tool can read. That conversion can highlight some issues with your source file, so we'll come back to that in just a minute. The second reason that internationalization is highly recommended, this converted file, the bilingual file, will be sent through a database of previous translations called a translation memory, or TM. So the TM can recall and reuse previous translations that are relevant to your translation project, but it's only going to recall translations that are very similar to your content. So in part, the degree of similarity hangs on the way the documents are written, but also on having a standard quality process of file preparation.
Okay, we're going to have a few polling questions throughout our presentation today. So our first question to the participants is, does your language service provider do internationalization or I-18N on your files? Number one is yes, number two is no, and number three is I have no idea. So we look forward to your responses.
Yes, Adam, can you launch the poll question?
Yes, the poll question is launched, and we have at this time with about 70% of the attendees responding, 45% have said yes, 18% have said no, and 36% have said I have no idea.
Excellent. Thank you for your responses. Okay, Carrie?
All right, so what is internationalization exactly? Internationalization means different things for different types of files. In general, document specialists are going to be going over the files to make sure that complete sentences will be pre-translated with the translation memory. So they're going to remove unnecessary formatting, uniting broken sentences, pulling text that's embedded in images. They're going to check for anchored objects, embedded tables, track changes, inconsistent character spacing, tying up all loose ends, and so on. So let's take a look at some internationalization samples. Most everyone uses Word documents, so we'll start there. These can often be the simplest format that we regularly receive for translation. Still, a little prep work is needed on most documents to get them translation ready. So did the document go through a few editing passes? We might see track changes with used. It's best to turn this off and accept all changes. Different translation tools might read track changes in different ways, and we don't want any confusion about what the final version of the document is. All right, and does the document still contain remnants of editing? Is the font consistent? Now, sometimes we see documents that contain sections of text that were clearly pasted in from another file and don't match the surrounding text. This might be a different font size, a different font entirely, or a different color. One letter might be left italic or blue. Did the author use character spacing to squish one line of text into a narrow space? So if the spacing is inconsistent with the surrounding text, we generally reset it back to 0. Your translated text is guaranteed to take up a different amount of space on the page than your source language. So all of these formatting changes to the text are tagged in the bilingual file with formatting tags. When it's intentional, the tags clearly mark the text with a format change. But when there are unintentional formatting changes in a document, this might result in tag soup and can be very difficult to translate. All right. Does the document contain images with embedded text? So this means the text is part of the image and cannot be edited. So unless the client has a standard rule for how to handle embedded text every time, we generally will ask at the start of a project if certain images will need the text pulled for translation. So if it does need translation, the text will have to be typed out in order to be captured in the bilingual file. Did the author use paragraph returns to reflow the text? If so, we'll go through and remove any unnecessary paragraph returns, because we want complete sentences being translated, not partial sentences. All right, did the author punch the space bar repeatedly to move the text to the next line or to line up the text under an indent? This has to be addressed before pre-translation. So why would this matter, really? It matters because of the two things I mentioned before. We're sending the translations to linguists and LSPs who are using CAT tools, and your files will be processed with a translation memory. So let's forget about excess paragraph returns for just a minute and focus on CAT tools and the TM. This is how it works. When this Word document is converted to a bilingual file, the content is divided into segments. Segments can basically be described as sentences or paragraphs that exist on their own, such as a paragraph header. The linguist will not only translate the file based on these segments, but this is also how the file will make its way into the translation memory. So when the translation is completed, the segments will be stored in the translation memory as a translation unit, or one-to-one pairs, source and target, an English source segment to a Spanish target segment, for example. So when a file is sent through pre-translation, the translation memory will find similar segments and offer them to the linguist as they work. So if it finds an exact match, it's going to pre-populate the target segment in the bilingual file with the existing translation from the TM. If it finds a similar but not exact match, the linguist can decide to reuse part of that or translate the new segment from scratch. So the quality and the speed of the translation can hang on both the quality of your source file and the quality of the segments being reused from the TM. So if either the source file or the TM contains cut-off sentences, typos, conversion errors, or other issues, the TM is not going to be able to find content matches, and the linguist is going to have a difficult time producing a quality result. So taking the time to prepare a quality source file makes all the difference in the translation of your file today and the performance of the translation memory for future translations. So it's worth doing. Okay, back to the excess paragraph returns. So when a CAT tool generates the bilingual file, the sentences are segmented according to a defined set of rules called segmentation rules. In general, you can think of them as beginning and ending a segment with a period or a paragraph return. So that might make perfect sense, except when you realize that document owners do not author or design their content with translation segmentation rules in mind. So if they want to wrap text to the next line, They might use a paragraph return to do this instead of just letting the text wrap on its own. They might want to highlight certain text and move it around on the page for effect, creating a text box that only contains a partial sentence. Now, this might look fine visually in a printed version, but the computer is going to segment this the only way that it knows how. So your translator might be able to connect the dots here while they are working on your file, but if they're not paying attention, two halves of a sentence could be translated separately, causing the final translation not to make any sense at all. And then there's the translation memory. When this project is added to the TM, in goes all these partial segments. So over time, all of those overlooked mistakes could really take a toll on the quality of your translation memory. So every time something careless slips through, it has the potential to affect all of your future translations. All right.
Okay, we've got our second polling question. So Adam, if you can bring that up, that'd be great. But the question is, do you have access to source files when you send, sorry, I can't see it.
Oh, there.
When you send documents for translation, or is there sometimes only a PDF available? First answer is yes, always. Second is we often send PDFs for translation, and number three, PDFs aren't source files, question mark.
So Steve Carey, with about 45, a little over half the attendees responding, 78% have said yes, always. 11% have said both. We often send PDFs for translation, and 11% also indicated PDFs aren't source files.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. PDF preparation. So when there aren't source files on hand, often a PDF is available to begin the translation project. But first, the PDF will need to be converted to a Word document for processing through a translation memory. A few things to note, though, while making working with PDFs rather difficult. So password protection. When an author password secures a PDF, the Word conversion can fail, or the result is gibberish, or scanned PDFs. So PDFs that are not created from a source file, but instead created from a scan of a document, are very difficult to work with. So these often produce converted Word documents with text that doesn't read as English. So these are quite laborious to go through and correct every line so that the document can be translated. So when a clean, non-secured PDF is supplied, a workable Word document can be created. So these often convert well, they're easy to read, but if you look at the hidden characters, you might see things like unnecessary paragraph returns or hyphenations on words that really shouldn't be hyphenated. So a PDF records textual information in a more concrete manner, with each character given a set position on the page. So when a PDF is converted into a Word document, sometimes the text is not able to reflow perfectly, and excess line breaks and spaces might need to be addressed. So even if a PDF looks like it's high quality, that doesn't guarantee that the conversion will be perfect. So the file still should be reviewed and prepped before sending to pre-translation. But if you have access to a source file, it really should be submitted along with PDF. Source files will minimize the amount of prep work and potential errors with your documents. However, if you cannot find a source file, as long as it's readable, the internationalization team can make do with what they've been given. So here's an example of a Word document that was converted from a PDF. Short video here. We're going to walk through what internationalization was done to prepare this file for translation. So first, we're watching the image and surrounding text boxes be ungrouped. And now character spacing is being corrected to eliminate any unwanted tags in the bilingual file. Okay, now we have an image here that's got embedded text. So we're watching the document specialist pull that embedded text from the image in a standard font and color. So for process consistency, it's done the same way in every file every time. Okay, we're watching some double spaces here be eliminated. Excess paragraph returns are taken care of. We want full complete sentences here for the TM. It looks like they're correcting some PDF conversion errors. Some S's were converted as 8s. All right, some soft returns are taken out here. Now, sometimes during conversion, tables are embedded within text boxes. So this can cause an issue during pre-translation. So we generally just cut the table and paste it back in within the body of the document. Okay, they're correcting a hyphenation here, typing in some missing text, correcting another hyphenation. And here we've got a sentence that's split between multiple cells of a table. So they're going to merge those cells and then remove that paragraph return. All right, so this was roughly a 2-minute video covering a lot of little fixes. So you'll see how this goes actually rather quickly. Okay. Now let's take a quick look at PowerPoint. In general, its preparation can be very similar to Word. So we check for hard returns, images with text, embedded objects such as Excel or Visio, and notes pages. So the notes pages can actually contain a lot more text than the slides themselves, so it's important to ask up front if the notes even need to be translated or if they're not necessary. So images with embedded text really is the most common element in PowerPoint presentations that we take care of. Sometimes these screenshots aren't critical for the translation and can remain in the image. But sometimes they are critical for understanding the slide. So during DTP, this image can be modified with the translated text. But if the text isn't pulled during internationalization, it won't be translated in your bilingual file. Your project manager should be asking you these questions at the start of the project if text needs to be pulled. Now, Excel documents. So the internationalization team is going to look at tabs. How many tabs are in your file? Do all of them need translation? How many columns are in the spreadsheet table? Maybe only one of the 15 columns on this sheet needs to be translated. How long are your tab names? There is actually a character limit on tab names, and translation of the name can break the file. Do you have any rows that are grouped or hidden? And is the author using Excel like you would a Word document? So we've seen this many times. A paragraph or sentence will be split in between multiple cells in the table. So it looks fine when you print it, but when Excel files are converted for translation, each cell will be its own segment in the bilingual file. These cells will need to be merged during internationalization. All right, InDesign. So in general, InDesign files are really quick to prepare. They tend to be a lot more polished than your average Word file. Internationalization follows many of the same rules as for Word. But with InDesign, you're also going to check for missing links or fonts. So these aren't an issue for pre-translation, but the team doing DTP, once the translation is finished, is going to need all of the linked images and fonts in order to finalize the file. Okay, tables will need to be unembedded from text boxes and other tables. Objects will be unanchored. Unnecessary hard returns will need to be removed. All right, we've seen this example before. The designer here used both hard returns to reflow the text, and they split up phrases into multiple text boxes. Each of these text boxes will end up in a separate segment in the bilingual file. So this text will need to be combined into a single box before it's sent out for pre-translation. The special formatting here can be replaced during DTP. Also with InDesign, large documents may need to be split up. So a really long InDesign file, say several hundred pages, particularly one laden with text-heavy tables, is going to take a long time to process and might error out. So we consider breaking these into smaller files before sending them through pre-translation. Also, if we need to strategically schedule DTP for rush projects, it might make sense to break up a large file into smaller chunks and parcel it out to multiple translators and DTP specialists. And finally, converting the file to IDML. So you can use IDML as an interchange format between different versions of InDesign, but it's also an XML-based file that goes through pre-translation more smoothly. All right, let's take a quick look at FrameMaker. With FrameMaker, our checklist includes setting element boundaries as tags, clearing change bars, checking master pages, and checking for soft returns and non-breaking spaces just as we would with other files. And finally, we save the files as MIF and send them through pre-translation.
Okay, for our third and final polling question, Adam, if you could activate that. The question is, when your translation projects are complete, do you end up with a reusable source file that was prepped for translation? First answer would be yes. Second one would be no. We only receive the translated files back, and I'm not even going to mention the third one.
All right, Adam?
Adam?
So with a little bit more than half the attendees voting, 70% have said no, we only received the translated files back. 20% said yes, and 10% answered, should the U.S. do away with the Electoral College?
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. So we've come full circle now. We've established that when you send files out to be translated, let's assume the files will be processed through a translation memory and will end up with bilingual files that the linguist will be using with cat tools. So knowing what we know about segmentation rules and embedded text and excess paragraph returns and so on, some minimal amount of file preparation or internationalization is absolutely necessary in that regard. We want clean, easily translatable files for the linguists, and when the translated bilingual files are used to update the memory, we want clean, complete segments in the TM that can be reused on our future projects. Now, I threw this out to you at the top of the presentation. So internationalization is critical because your files are processed through a translation memory to find content matches before they're sent out to the translators. The better those files are prepped for translation, the higher matches we are likely to see in the memory. So here's a sample report of the average rate of TM matches by target language. So for all the files submitted for translation here, 86% of the content translated into Spanish was able to find a match in the TM. Okay, the higher the matches found in the TM, the more your linguists are able to reuse that content that's already been translated. That means less new content to translate from scratch. So you can see how this might affect the speed and consistency of your translation project. Higher matches also affect how much you are paying for your project. So pricing from language service providers is based on a per word charge. The greater matches you have, the less that per word charge is going to be. Okay, look at this table. See new text on the right-hand side. That's for totally new content, translating a word from scratch. Now we see how that price comes down as we move from right to left in the table. The match rate gets higher, the price goes down. So here's a sample report of translation statistics. The cost of translation without a translation memory is significantly higher than the cost using a TM. This is because per word costs are much lower due to the matches found in the TM. So your potential for savings is higher when the match rates are higher. So the key to saving money on translation comes right back around to if and how your files are prepped for translation. So we do internationalization, one, because it produces higher quality bilingual files for the translators. We do internationalization because we want higher quality translation memory to pull from. We do internationalization because the end result is more likely a better quality document. And we do internationalization because it saves money, and that makes everyone happy.
Excellent. Great job, Carrie, and thank you again for everybody's participation. At this point, Adam, I think we'd like to open it up for questions. We covered quite a bit of material, and hopefully it wasn't too complex, and we have some questions out there.
Great. Well, thank you, Steve and Carrie. Very informative webinar. The first question that has come in is, on translation invoices, what details should we look for to show the internalization was done on our files before they were translated?
Yeah, so a lot of times translation invoices can be very simplified. You'll only end up with a single line item for the translation. If it's a little bit more atypical, you're going to look for a line item for DTP or pre-DTP. Here at Kinetic, we often add in a separate line item specifically for internationalization. You won't always see that on a translation invoice. So it's key to make sure that your LSP is giving you that information so you know what was done on your files.
Yeah. That's good. Thank you, Adam. Anything further?
Great. Well, thank you, Carrie. The last question that has come in is, how do you prepare your files for translation?
Yeah, so that's a question for the audience. So how informed is the audience? So what do you do to prep your files before you send them out to the LSP?
Any responses there?
Nothing as of yet.
Okay. All right, do we have any other questions?
Oh, here we go. The first one came in is, after this, I know how to check for odd spacing and typos. Well, thank you, Christina.
Okay. Yes, typos can actually cause translators a lot of grief because you're not really sure what exactly that word is supposed to be.
The next response that has come in is, we have in-house quality check tool that we run on our files.
That is very smart. That is very smart. Because a lot of the content that we get in, it almost looks like someone hasn't even bothered to read over the document before they send it out. So that can minimize a lot of the back and forth questions that will come from the linguist.
And those are all the responses that we have gotten in.
Okay. All right. Do we have any further questions from the audience?
So at this time we don't. So I'd like to thank you, Steve, and you, Carrie, for this wonderful webinar. And I'd like to thank our attendees, thank all of our attendees for attending. This will conclude today's broadcast. You'll be able to access the recorded version of this webinar in the archive section of our website located at www.dclab.com. Thank you again, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.